Your neighbors are going to walk past your yard this season and stop dead in their tracks. Not because you worked harder than anyone else on your block. Not because you hired a landscaping crew. Not because you spent a fortune on cedar planks and fence posts. They are going to stop because you made one smart decision today and by next summer. Your backyard will be completely invisible to every single person who used to be able to see straight through it. I am talking about a living wall. A green, lush, towering natural barrier that local ordinances cannot touch, that grows on its own, that looks 100 times better than any fence you could build, and that adds genuine, measurable value to your property. And I am going to give you 9 specific trees to do it with right now in this video. Stay with me until tree number 6, because that one is the one most people completely overlook, and it solves a problem that I hear about constantly from homeowners with tight suburban lots. Let me tell you something very important before we get into the list. Most people who build a fence do it out of frustration. A neighbor who stares, a road that got too busy, a yard that used to feel private and now feels like a fishbowl. So they call a contractor. They spend $3,000, $5,000, sometimes $8,000 on a wooden fence. And within 5 years, that fence is leaning, warping, rotting at the posts, and needs to be repainted or replaced entirely. And even when it is brand new, most of those fences top out at 6 feet, because that is exactly where local ordinances put the ceiling. 6 feet is not nothing, but it is also not privacy. Not real privacy. Not the kind where you can sit in your own backyard on a Saturday afternoon and feel like the world does not exist. Here is what nobody at the lumber yard, the fence company, or the big box store ever told you. Living trees are almost universally exempt from those same height restrictions. While your municipality will cap a constructed fence at 6 feet, they generally have no authority over how tall a naturally growing tree gets. That means a row of the right trees can legally reach 40, 50, 60 feet and block every sightline, every second-floor window, every elevated deck across the property line, without a single permit, without a single fine, and without anyone being able to tell you to cut it down. Now, I said almost universally because I want to be straight with you. Some HOAs and some very specific local ordinances do classify tightly planted rows of trees as a natural fence and try to regulate them the same way. And trees planted directly on a shared property line can legally become what is called a boundary tree, which gives your neighbor joint ownership over it. So do your homework, check your local rules, and keep your tree line a few feet inside your own property. That is the legal due diligence. Now let us get to the actual trees. Number 1, Thuja Green Giant. If you only plant one tree from this entire video, this is the one. The Thuja Green Giant, which is a hybrid of Thuja standishii and Thuja plicata, is the single most widely planted privacy tree in America for a reason. This thing grows 3 to 5 feet every single year. Let me put that in terms that mean something. You plant a 6-foot tree this spring. By the following spring, it can be 9 or 10 feet tall. By the 3rd year, you could be looking at a 12 or 15-foot wall of dense emerald green. And it does not stop there. The green giant matures at 40 to 60 feet, which means it eventually creates a screen that blocks not just your neighbor's yard, but their 2nd-story bedroom windows. It is naturally deer-resistant, which is critical if you are gardening in rural or suburban areas where deer pressure is constant. It has virtually no serious pest or disease problems. It handles drought well once established. And it grows in a naturally pyramidal shape that looks clean and intentional without you ever having to pick up a pair of pruning shears. This tree performs in USDA hardiness zones 5 through 8, which covers an enormous portion of the country from the mid-Atlantic down through the southeast and across the Midwest. For most of you watching this video, the green giant is your answer. Plant them 12 to 15 feet apart for a traditional screen, or as close as 8 feet apart if you want faster gap closure. The closer you space them, the sooner you have a wall. Number 2, Leyland Cypress. Now I want to talk about the Leyland cypress for the people dealing with large properties, coastal conditions, or situations where you genuinely need a heavy-duty industrial-scale privacy screen. The Leyland cypress is a hybrid of Cupressocyperus leylandii, and like the Green Giant, it pushes 3 to 5 feet of new growth every single year. But it gets bigger. At maturity, this tree can hit 60 to 70 feet tall and spread 15 to 25 feet wide. That is not a tree you plant along a tight suburban property line. That is a tree you plant when you have room and you want to block out the world permanently. What makes the Leyland cypress stand apart is its tolerance for salt spray, which makes it the go-to choice for gardeners on the Atlantic or Gulf coasts, where the ocean air kills a lot of other evergreens. It also handles a range of soil conditions and adapts to both heavy clay and sandier coastal soils. It performs in zones 6 through 10. Give it space from structures, from power lines, from your house foundation. This is not a tree you squeeze into a small side yard, but if you have a back 40, a rural property, a large suburban lot, or a coastal home where nothing else wants to grow and you need a wall of green, the Leyland cypress will give you exactly that. One thing I want to be honest about, the Leyland cypress can develop certain fungal issues like Ceridium canker in very hot, humid climates when trees are stressed. The solution is simple. Do not crowd them, do not overwater, and make sure they have good air circulation. Plant them with the respect the size demands, and they will reward you for decades. Number 3. Emerald Green Arbor Vitae. Not everyone needs 60 feet of coverage. Not everyone has the yard for it. If you are working with a smaller property, a tight side yard, a narrow strip between your driveway and your neighbor's fence, or a front yard situation where proportion matters, then the Emerald Green Arbor Vitae is the tree built exactly for you. Its cultivar name is Thuja occidentalis smaragd, which is Danish for emerald, and it earns that name. The foliage on this tree is a deep, rich, jewel-toned green that holds its color beautifully through winter, even in cold climates. It grows 1 to 2 feet per year, which is slower than the Green Giant, but it tops out at only 10 to 15 feet tall and 3 to 4 feet wide. The reason I bring that up is not just about size. It is about shape. The emerald green naturally forms a tight, elegant column that stays neat without constant trimming. You do not have to shear it into a shape. Nature already did that for you. Plant them 3 to 4 feet apart for a solid hedge, and within 3 to 4 years, you will have a clean, uniform wall of green that would cost you a significant amount of money if you paid a landscape designer to achieve the same look. It performs in USDA zones 3 through 8, which gives it one of the widest cold hardiness ranges on this entire list. If you are up in Minnesota, Wisconsin, or Michigan, this is a tree that will not flinch at your winters. Number 4. Full Speed Hedge American Pillar Arbor Vitae. Here is one that most garden centers do not carry in large quantities, which is a shame, because it solves a very specific problem that I hear about constantly. The problem is this: you need privacy fast, you have a narrow property line, and you cannot afford to give up 4 or 5 feet of yard width to a thick hedge. That is exactly where the Full Speed A-Hedge American Pillar Arbor Vitae was bred to perform. This is a newer cultivar developed specifically for tight suburban spaces, and the numbers are remarkable. It grows fast, reaching 15 to 20 feet at maturity, but it stays only 3 to 5 feet wide. That columnar profile means you get serious height and serious coverage while barely giving up any yard space at all. Do not let the smaller footprint fool you into thinking the privacy is thinner. The branching on this tree is dense, and the foliage is packed tightly enough that when you plant them 4 to 5 feet apart, you get a solid visual barrier. It performs in USDA zones 4 through 8. If you are struggling to find it locally, check online nurseries that specialize in fast-growing hedges, because this one is absolutely worth hunting down. For narrow lots, townhouse yards, side entries, or anywhere a standard-sized arborvitae would be too wide, the American Pillar is the answer. Number 5. Wax Myrtle. Now I want to talk about one of the most underrated fast-growing screening plants in the American South, and that is the wax myrtle, botanically known as Morella cerifera. This is a broadleaf evergreen, not a needle-leafed conifer like the ones we have been discussing, and that distinction matters. The wax myrtle brings a completely different texture to a privacy screen. The leaves are glossy, lance-shaped, and aromatic, and when the breeze moves through them, the entire hedge releases a pleasant, bayberry-like fragrance. But here is the number that will get your attention. The wax myrtle can push up to 5 feet of new growth in a single growing season under good conditions. That is faster than almost anything else on this list. It matures at 15 to 20 feet tall, and it tolerates heavy pruning, which means if it starts getting too big or too wide, you can cut it back aggressively and it will push back without drama. It is also a native plant to the southeastern United States, which means it is adapted to the heat, the humidity, the sandy soils, and the wet conditions that kill most imported evergreens. It performs in zones 7 through 11, making it ideal for gardeners in Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, Louisiana, and Texas. If you are in the Deep South and you are frustrated with plants that cook out in July, the wax myrtle was born for your yard. Plant them 5 to 6 feet apart for a fast-closing screen, or leave them wider and let them develop into a more naturalistic thicket. Either way, you can have complete visual privacy within 2 growing seasons. That is not an exaggeration. I want to pause here for a second, because I get this question all the time, and I want to address it directly. People ask me, where do you even get this kind of information? Whose yard has a green giant hedge that you can actually look at and trust? Let me ask you something honestly. Where else are you getting this advice? Are you getting it from the teenager behind the register at your local garden center who read the tag on the pot? Are you getting it from a website trying to sell you something? Because nobody at your local nursery ever sat you down and told you that you can legally grow a 60-foot privacy screen without ever filing a permit. Nobody told you about the American pillar and why it matters for tight lots. That information is not profitable for them to share. This channel exists to give you the kind of straight, specific, no-nonsense advice that the industry has never had a financial incentive to give you for free. If you are getting value from this, hit that subscribe button right now. It costs you absolutely nothing, and every week my channel puts out content built around making your yard work for you instead of against you. Number 6. Spartan Juniper. Here is the one I told you to wait for, and I want to explain why this tree solves a problem that most privacy planting guides completely ignore. The Spartan juniper, which is Juniperus chinensis spartan, is a columnar evergreen that reaches 15 to 18 feet tall but stays only 4 to 5 feet wide. Now, on the surface, those numbers sound a lot like the American pillar arborvitae we already talked about. But the Spartan juniper is built for a completely different set of conditions, and that is why it belongs on this list separately. The Spartan juniper is one of the most heat-tolerant and cold-tolerant columnar evergreens available to American gardeners. It performs in USDA zones 4 through 9, which is an extraordinarily wide range. It handles the desert heat of Arizona, the brutal winters of the northern plains, the humidity of the Midwest, and the rocky, compacted soils of suburban developments where the topsoil was scraped off during construction, and you are essentially planting in subgrade fill. Most trees struggle in that environment. The Spartan juniper does not care. It establishes quickly, grows at a solid rate, maintains its shape naturally, and requires almost no intervention once it is in the ground. It is also naturally deer-resistant, which for gardeners in the Mid-Atlantic, the Northeast, and rural areas across the Midwest is not a small thing. Deer will walk right past a row of Spartan junipers and look for something else to destroy. Plant them 4 to 5 feet apart for a dense, narrow screen that takes up minimal yard width while building meaningful height year after year. Number 7. Nellie R. Stevens. Holly, I want to talk about a tree that does double duty in a way none of the others on this list can match, and that is the Nellie R. Stevens. Holly, technically Ilex X. Nellie R. Stevens. This is a fast-growing broadleaf evergreen that puts on 2 to 3 feet of new growth every year and matures somewhere between 15 and 25 feet tall. The foliage is dense, deep green, and beautifully lustrous. In late fall and winter, It puts on a display of bright red berries that turns a functional privacy screen into something genuinely beautiful. But that is not the double duty I am referring to. Let me tell you something that I want you to really think about. If you live on a property where you have had issues with people or animals cutting through your yard, the Nellie R. Stevens holly is a physical security barrier. The leaves are spiny and genuinely unpleasant to brush against. A row of these established at the property line creates something that deer avoid, that dogs do not push through, and that people absolutely do not want to squeeze past. This is a living fence that bites back, and it does it while looking beautiful from your side of the yard. It performs in zones 6 through 9, tolerates both full sun and significant shade, and handles heat and drought well once established. If you need privacy and a deterrent, this is the tree. Space them 5 to 6 feet apart for a dense hedge, and do not be afraid to let them reach their full height. Let them grow. That is the whole point. Number 8. Cherry laurel. Now, I want to address the homeowners who are dealing with a specific and frustrating situation, and that is shade. Maybe you are bordered by a neighbor with large, established trees. Maybe your fence line runs on the north side of a structure and gets very little direct sun. Maybe you have already tried planting arborvitae in that spot and watched them slowly decline because they are not getting the light they need. The cherry laurel, which is Prunus laurocerasus, was designed for exactly that scenario. This is a fast-growing broadleaf evergreen that adds 2 to 3 feet per year and matures at 10 to 15 feet. Its leaves are large, glossy, and a deep, rich green that gives it the look of a lush traditional hedge rather than a row of conifers, which in certain landscape styles is actually a significant aesthetic advantage. In spring, it produces fragrant white flower spikes that are genuinely attractive, and it tolerates shade ranging from partial to quite heavy, which makes it one of the few fast-growing privacy options that will actually perform when sunlight is limited. It grows in zones 6 through 9. There is one thing I want to tell you about cherry laurel before you plant it. Like most members of the Prunus family, the seeds and leaves contain compounds that are toxic if ingested by pets or livestock. That does not affect its value as a privacy screen, but it is information you should have if you have animals that graze or dogs that tend to chew on plants. Keep that in mind and plant accordingly. Number 9. Carolina Sapphire Cypress. I saved this one for last because it is genuinely different from everything else on this list, and different in a way that I think a lot of you are going to respond to. The Carolina Sapphire Cypress, which is Cupressus arizonica var. glabra, is not green. It is blue. A rich, cool, silvery blue that stands out against the landscape like nothing else, especially when morning or late afternoon light hits it at an angle. In a row, these trees create a privacy screen that looks like it was designed by an architect rather than installed by a homeowner. The visual impact is extraordinary. But the appearance is not even the most interesting thing about this tree. It grows 3 to 5 feet per year and matures at 20 to 30 feet, which puts it in the upper tier of this list for eventual height. And it produces a strong, clean fragrance, a cedar-like scent that permeates the surrounding air on warm days. That fragrance is not just pleasant. It functions as a natural deterrent for deer and many common garden pests, which means this tree is doing multiple jobs simultaneously. It is creating privacy, it is looking stunning, it is fragrant, and it is discouraging the animals and insects that would otherwise damage your garden beds nearby. It performs in USDA zones 7 through 9, making it best suited for the South, the Southwest, and the Pacific coastal regions. In drier climates, particularly, this tree is exceptional. Once established, it is quite drought-tolerant and requires very little supplemental water. If you want a privacy screen that people stop and ask about, this is the one. Now, before I wrap this list up, I want to stop and give you something that you cannot get from a plant tag or a nursery brochure, and that is the practical knowledge that determines whether your privacy screen succeeds or fails in the first 2 years. Because here is the truth. I have seen people plant the right trees in the wrong way and get slow, struggling, gapped-out hedges that take twice as long to fill in. And most of those failures come down to 4 specific mistakes that are completely avoidable once you know about them. The first mistake: planting in a single, straight line. Most people put their privacy trees in a straight row and then wonder why they still have gaps 3 years later. There is an old farmer's trick that changes everything, and it is called the staggered double row, or what some people call the zigzag method. Instead of planting tree, space, in one line, you plant 2 offset rows with the trees staggered so that each tree in the back row fills the gap between 2 trees in the front row. This fills in visual gaps dramatically faster because you are layering the canopies instead of trying to close gaps with single-width coverage. It requires more trees and more space. But if your goal is maximum privacy as fast as possible, this is how the people with the best screens do it. And while I am on the subject of installation techniques, I want to mention something called berming. If you want to jumpstart your privacy wall before those trees have had 3 or 4 growing seasons to gain significant height, consider planting your trees on a raised berm. A berm is simply a mounded ridge of soil, 2 to 3 feet higher than the surrounding grade, that you build along the property line before planting. When you plant your trees on top of that berm, you get 2 to 3 feet of instant height gain from day one. You also get improved drainage for trees like arborvitae that do not want wet feet. And on properties with poor, compacted soil, planting on a berm of quality amended soil gives the roots a much better environment to establish quickly. The combination of a staggered double row planted on a raised berm is, in my experience, the fastest path to a completely opaque living privacy screen available to the average homeowner. The second mistake: quick sprinkle watering. There is a watering technique that I teach everyone who plants a new privacy hedge, and it is called low and slow. Here is why it matters. Fast-growing evergreens do not just need water. They need deep water that reaches the full depth of the root ball and encourages the roots to consex. Follow that moisture down into the soil rather than staying shallow and surface-dependent. A quick sprinkle with a hose accomplishes almost nothing beyond wetting the top inch of soil and giving you the false impression that you watered the tree. What you want to do instead is take your garden hose, turn it down to a very low trickle, and set the end of it directly on the soil at the base of the tree. Then walk away for 2 to 4 hours. Let that water move slowly and deeply into the root zone. For the first 10 days after planting, do this every single day. After that initial establishment period, back off and water deeply 2 to 3 times per week for the first summer. After the first full growing season, most of these trees, particularly the junipers, arborvitae, and the Carolina Sapphire, will need very little supplemental water at all. But getting them through that first summer with deep, consistent watering is the single thing that determines whether your trees launch aggressively or sit and sulk for 2 seasons. The third mistake: pruning into old wood. I hear from homeowners regularly who trim their arborvitae or juniper hedge and now have permanent brown gaps that have not filled back in after 2 or 3 years. Let me explain exactly what is happening and why. Arborvitae, junipers, and most conifers on this list will only regenerate new growth from the green, actively growing portions of their branches. The brown, woody interior of the branch, what arborists call old wood, does not have dormant buds that can push new foliage. If you cut past the living green growth and expose old wood, that section of the plant will remain bare permanently. It is not going to grow back. That gap is now a permanent feature of your hedge unless you remove the tree entirely and replant. The rule is simple: never cut past the green. When you prune these trees, stay within the current season's growth. Light shaping is fine. Aggressive shearing into the interior is not. And for most of the trees on this list, you will rarely need to prune at all. The green giant, the Spartan juniper, the Nelly R. Stevens holly, they are all naturally well-shaped plants that prefer to be left alone. Your pruning shears are not doing these trees any favors unless you have a specific reason to use them. The fourth mistake: volcano mulching. This is one of those things that looks like good gardening from a distance, but is quietly killing trees all across America. Volcano mulching is when you pile mulch up around the base of a tree in a cone shape, sometimes 6, 8, 10 inches deep right against the trunk. People do it because it looks tidy and intentional, but what it actually does is hold constant moisture against the bark of the tree, which causes crown rot, bark decay, fungal disease, and creates a perfect environment for boring insects to overwinter and attack the tree at the soil line. I want you to do this instead. Apply a 2 to 3 inch layer of mulch in a ring around each tree, extending out to the drip line if you can, and then pull that mulch back 3 to 4 inches away from the trunk so that the root flare of the tree, the place where the trunk meets the soil, is completely exposed to open air. That mulch ring does real work. It conserves soil moisture, moderates soil temperature, and suppresses weeds. But it needs to stay off the trunk to do its job without causing damage. Go check your existing trees right now after this video. If the mulch is touching the trunk, pull it back. It is one of the simplest corrections you can make and one of the most impactful for long-term tree health. The fifth mistake, stomping the soil after planting. This one seems like common sense, and that is exactly why so many people do it. You dig a hole, you set the tree in, you fill the hole back in, and then you use your foot to firm the soil down and secure the tree in place. It feels like the right thing to do. It is not. When you stomp or compress the soil directly around a newly planted tree, you are crushing the fine, hair-like feeder roots that the tree depends on to absorb water and nutrients during establishment. In severe cases, you can kill a newly planted tree this way before it ever has a real chance to take hold. The correct technique is to fill the planting hole about halfway with your native soil, and then, instead of stomping, fill the hole the rest of the way with water. Let that water drain slowly and naturally, pulling the loose soil down into the air pockets without any compaction or root damage. Once the water has drained, top off with the remaining soil, water again gently, and apply your mulch ring. The tree is secure without the roots being crushed, and it will begin establishing immediately. And one more thing I want to address in this section, because I know someone watching this video is thinking about hybrid willows. I have seen those ads. The hybrid willow, which is Salix X Austri, grows 6 to 10 feet in a single year. The ads make it sound like a miracle, and it does grow that fast. But nobody selling those trees advertises what happens in year 3 through 10 when the root system, which is highly invasive and relentlessly seeks out water, finds your sewer line, infiltrates your septic tank, wraps around your foundation drain, or lifts your driveway from underneath. The repair costs for that damage run into tens of thousands of dollars, and certain willow relatives are legally regulated as invasive species in states like Ohio. The 9 trees I gave you in this video will give you legitimate, legal, beautiful, permanent privacy without that liability. If you are tempted by the hybrid willow because of the speed, plant a green giant or a wax myrtle instead. You will not regret it, and your foundation will thank you. Now let me bring this together, because I want to make sure you leave this video knowing exactly what to do. If you are in the north, zones 3 through 5, your starting point is the emerald green arbor vitae, or the green giant. Both handle cold winters without difficulty. If you have a tight lot, go emerald green. If you have space and want maximum height, go green giant. If you are in the mid-Atlantic or the Midwest, zones 5 through 7, you have the widest selection on this list available to you. The green giant, the American pillar, the Spartan juniper, the Nellie R, Stevens holly, and the cherry laurel all perform well in your zone range. Your choice depends on your yard conditions. Full sun and good drainage, green giant or Spartan juniper. Shade along the fence line, cherry laurel. Want berries and deterrents? Nellie R, Stevens holly. If you are in the south or southeast, zones 7 through 10, you have options that nobody farther north can access. The wax myrtle is your fastest growing native option, and it was built for your heat and humidity. The Nellie R. Stevens holly thrives in your zone range. The Carolina Sapphire is spectacular in zones 7 through 9. If you are in Florida or coastal Louisiana, lean heavily on the wax myrtle and give Leyland cypress a serious look for the coastal exposure. If you are in the Southwest, Zones 8 through 10 with dry conditions, the Carolina Sapphire Cypress is extraordinary in your climate. Once established, it handles drought far better than most evergreens and gives you that stunning blue color that nothing else on this list can match. And regardless of where you are, regardless of which tree you choose, I want you to remember these 4 things. Stagger your rows instead of planting single file. Water deeply and slowly, especially in that first summer. Never cut into old wood, and keep your mulch off the trunk. Those 4 practices will turn a good planting into an exceptional one. I want to take a moment here and say something directly to the people who have been watching this channel for a while, and to the people who just found it today. If you are in your 50s, your 60s, or beyond, and you have spent too many summers in this yard fighting things that were not your fault, buying plants that the nursery told you would work and watching them fail, spending money on chemical sprays every season just to keep your yard from looking like a disaster, this channel exists for you specifically. You have earned the right to sit in your own backyard without working harder than you should have to. You have put in the time. You deserve a yard that works with you and not against you. Every video on this channel is built around that idea. The 9 trees I gave you today are not high maintenance. They are not fussy. They do not need to be babied once they are in the ground. The green giant does not ask for fertilizer. The wax myrtle does not need to be coddled through the summer. The Spartan juniper will stand in your yard through whatever your climate throws at it and come back looking exactly the same the following spring. These are plants that reward patience and punish overmanagement. Leave them alone, plant them correctly, water them through the first season, and they will build your privacy wall while you sit back and watch it happen year by year. That is what real gardening looks like for people who have figured out what matters. Not working harder, working smarter, choosing the right plant for the right place, and then getting out of its way. Now here is what I want from you before you close this video. I want you to go down to the comments section right now and tell me 2 things. First, your US state or your USDA hardiness zone. And second, which tree from this list you are going to put in the ground this season. That comment takes you 10 seconds to write. It helps me understand exactly who is watching this channel and where, and it helps me build future content around the specific conditions you are actually dealing with. I read every single one of those comments. I pay attention to them. They are how I know what to cover next. And I want you to do one more thing. Think of one person in your life right now. One neighbor, one friend, one family member who has a yard situation that needs this information, someone who has been dealing with a nosy neighbor, a busy road, a yard that feels exposed and uncomfortable. Send them this video. Share it right now before you forget. The information in this video could change the way they approach their yard permanently. It costs you nothing to share it, and it could save them years of frustration and thousands of dollars in fence construction costs that will never give them the height or the longevity of a living tree. This channel is free. It is here every single week. It is built specifically for American gardeners who want real information based on real experience. Not garden center upselling and not watered down generic advice that applies to everyone and helps no one. Subscribe if you have not already. Hit that notification bell so you know when new videos go up. And go get those trees in the ground. I am Mr. Hope, and I will see you in the next one.